There's a headline going around right now that says, Swedish scientists decoded a secret to infinite yields using electric current. I have to be honest with you before we go one step further. That headline is not true, and I'm not going to pretend it is. No scientist anywhere has decoded infinite yields, because infinite yields do not exist on this planet. But here is what is true, and what is far more interesting than the headline. Electricity does affect how plants grow. It is real, it is measurable, and it has been studied for almost 3 centuries. The problem is that the truth is small, specific, and quiet, while the lie is loud. So today, I'm going to walk you through what electric current actually does to a plant, what the real research found, and where the whole thing turns into nonsense. Stay with me, because by the end, you will be able to spot the difference between a real method and a copper wire scam in about 10 seconds. Let me start with the oldest observation, the one that started everything. Farmers noticed, hundreds of years ago, that crops often grew better after a thunderstorm. That part is real, and we now know why. Lightning carries enormous energy, and that energy splits nitrogen in the air and binds it into a form the soil can absorb. Rain then carries that nitrogen down into the ground, where roots take it up. So the storm was not feeding the plant with electricity. The storm was making fertilizer out of thin air. That distinction matters. And you will see why in a minute, because people took that observation and ran in the wrong direction with it. In the 1700s, a doctor in Edinburgh hooked plants up to an electrostatic generator and reported faster growth. That was the birth of what people now call electroculture. And for the next 2 centuries, the results stayed stubbornly the same. Sometimes a plot grew a little more, sometimes a little less, and nobody could make it repeat reliably. One historical summary put it plainly, that favorable results appeared from time to time, but were uncertain and depended heavily on the weather. Another noted that plants in poor soil were barely affected, because electricity provides neither nutrients nor energy. Read that line again, because it is the key to this whole topic. Electricity is not food, and it is not fuel. A plant builds itself from sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and minerals. An electric current does not add a single one of those things. So if anyone tells you that current alone will feed a starving patch of soil, they are selling you something. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting, because the modern science is not zero. It is just modest, and it works through real mechanisms, not magic. In recent years, researchers built devices that capture energy from wind and rain and turn it into a controlled high-voltage electric field. One of those studies was published in a serious peer-reviewed journal, and the numbers were honest and specific. The system increased the germination speed of pea seeds by roughly 26%, and it raised the pea yield by roughly 18%. Notice what that is and what it is not. It is a real measured improvement under controlled conditions, with a known setup and a clear mechanism. It is not infinite, it is not guaranteed, and it was not a copper wire stuck in the dirt. It was a precisely engineered electric field, applied to a specific crop, at a specific stage, in a controlled environment. That is the entire difference between science and the scam. Other lab work points the same way. High-voltage pulsed fields have sped up seed germination and raised seedling vigor in tests on tomato and other seeds. There is even research into biodegradable films that generate a gentle electric field in the soil to support early growth. So the field is alive and people are doing careful work in it. But every honest version of this research shares 3 features. The voltage is controlled, the crop and stage are specified, and the result is measured against a proper, untreated comparison. Now let me show you the other side, the part the viral headlines never mention. Walk into the world of online electroculture and you will see one image everywhere. A copper wire, twisted into a coil or an antenna, pushed into the soil next to a plant. The claim is that this antenna pulls energy from the atmosphere and supercharges growth. And I need to be direct with you about this. Plant scientists who have actually tested these copper antenna setups found no reliable evidence that they do anything at all. When researchers look for a mechanism, a real physical explanation for how a passive copper wire would boost growth, there's not one that holds up. That is why most scientists classify the copper antenna version of electroculture as pseudoscience. And around that pseudoscience grows a familiar story. The story says that chemical companies buried this knowledge, that the industry forced scientists to stop researching it, that there is a secret they do not want you to have. I want you to be careful with that story, no matter who tells it. Because the honest reason copper antennas are not in research journals is simpler. They were tested, and they did not work in a way anyone could repeat. There is no conspiracy needed to explain a method that simply does not deliver. So let me give you the clean summary, the part worth keeping. Electricity can influence plant growth, mainly through controlled electric fields applied to seeds and seedlings with modest and species-specific results. A storm helps your garden by making nitrogen, not by electrifying your tomatoes. And a copper wire in the soil, sold as an atmospheric antenna, has no reliable evidence behind it. If you remember only one rule, make it this one. Real methods name the voltage, the crop, the stage, and the measured result. Scams name a secret, an enemy, and a promise of infinite yield. Now, here is what I could not fit into this video, and it is the part that actually matters if you want to experiment responsibly. I have to be honest about the limits of a single video. There are 3 things I left out on purpose, because each one needs real detail to be useful and safe. The first is the controlled field protocol, the actual conditions under which electric field treatment has shown measurable gains, including which crops responded and at what stage of growth. The second is the species and stage map, because the effect appears in some seeds and seedlings and is absent in others, and knowing which is the whole game. The third is the pseudoscience checklist, the exact set of red flags that tells you, in seconds, when an electroculture claim has crossed from real research into a sales pitch. Those 3, the controlled field protocol, the species and stage map, and the pseudoscience checklist, are written out in full in the complete guide. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. I kept them out of the video because half an explanation of this topic is worse than none. If you want the full version, with the real sources laid out so you can check them yourself, that is where it lives. And honestly, even if you never use a single volt in your garden, the checklist alone will save you from 100 bad products. That is the real value here. Not a secret, not a miracle, just the ability to tell what is true. If this is the kind of straight answer you want, the kind that respects your time and your intelligence, then subscribe to this channel. Because there is a lot of noise in this space, and very little of this. I will see you in the next one.